meter. Can we have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. We are looking at a simple poem. We are looking at a simple poem in order to have some sort of practical steps. Can we have the slide, please? Look at the poem. The next one, please. This is a very, very famous poem by Matthew Arnold. Let's read the poem, my dear students.
The sea is calm tonight, the tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand, glimmering and vast, out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window, sweet is the night air.
My dear students, you notice that those lines there indicate that we have to move on to the next line. To make it convenient, we have it continuously in the same line. But if you are writing it on a piece of paper, on a page, you will probably, the sea is calm tonight, you will move on to the next line. The tide is full, the moon lies fair. Okay? But you get the idea of how this simple poem we can use in order to do scansion. So what are we looking at? We have to begin. We have the poem in front of you. Begin by counting the nouns. I've told you already that nouns have a long accent. We are talking of monosyllabic nouns. So could we count some of the nouns, my dear students? Let's do it quickly. And we have Namita doing it for you. The nouns
Sea,
that we have.
Tide, moon, straits, coast, light, cliffs, England, bay, window, night air.
Notice that when you have single syllables, there's no problem. But when you have double syllables, more than one syllable, that is bisyllabic, disyllabic words, then you need to have one stressed and one unstressed. Or if you use the language of prosody, one long and one short. What about adjectives, Namita? Students, come on, let's very quickly look at the adjectives. Let's begin with calm.
Full, fair, French, glimmering. Then we have vast, tranquil, sweet.
Notice again, when we look at glimmering and tranquil, you would have to do something about them. Because look at the word tranquil, tranquil, tranquil. Say that again, my dear students, and you will realize that it is long followed by short.
Tranquil.
What about the verbs? They are all long.
Yes. We have to be, as in am, is, are,
Yeah,
art.
but they are all short, Namita.
Right.
We have to tell our students that those verbs are short. But what about the other verbs?
Then we have
Come.
yes, we have to have.
We have gleams. Yeah.
Definitely. Lies. Stand. And as you mentioned, ma'am, come.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember that prepositions and conjunctions are always short. Prepositions and conjunctions are always short. So are articles, right? Because they are only serving, as I mentioned earlier, a grammatical purpose. What have we done, my dear students? What have we done? We have taken a simple poem. We have tried to understand how we begin counting. How do we count? By keeping some of these simple rules in mind. Is it true that always all poems are in a same regular meter? Is it that any poem that you take up for the entire poem you can have iambic trimeter or dactylic pentameter? My dear students, the answer is no. You can do this kind of scansion for a line, maybe for a poem, maybe for a verse, what we call a verse paragraph maybe. But if you try and apply it to Milton's Paradise Lost, for example, I'm sure you'll be totally lost. Don't try to do that with long poems, right?
Right.
We want to understand the meter. We want to understand the regularity of meter. Then we must do it only with shorter passages from good poetry. For example, if you look at the blank verse of Shakespeare, certainly look at the good poems, look at the good passages, and you'll see how easily it lends itself to this kind of scansion. But you can't take the entire play of Hamlet and expect, this to happen. It doesn't
follow the
happen.
same
It
meter.
cannot happen.
Right.
Because, as critics have reminded us again and again, when you force yourself to write in a particular way, it becomes artificial. And great poets do not believe in artificiality. Right? Whatever they are saying has to come natural. And that is why sometimes we talk about the inbuilt rhythm of a poem. The inbuilt rhythm. It might not really stand to this kind of testing, that it's 10 syllables or 12 syllables or 15 syllables or whatever. But there is something in some of Eliot's poems, for example,
Right.
some of 20th century poetry, you would find this. This happens very often. I want you to look at what we call mixed meter. Mixed meter is where in one line you probably have a very clear, anapest.
Iambic, right.
Iambic. Let's take iambic as the example because that's the most common one and it's the easiest to understand. But sometimes what happens is there is a change. Somewhere along the way, as you are reading the poem, you will realize that there is a shift. You will notice that it changes. And then we call it occasional meter. I'm talking about mixed meter. My dear students, we go with the assumption that you've already understood the regular meters. Having understood the regular meters, we are going into what are called mixed meters. That is, you make a combination. There could be a dactylic pentameter
Right.
followed by an iambic pentameter. Right? So this could happen. So then we call it occasional.
Right.
Take an entire poem, you'll find that it works in the first line of every verse. But the second line is different. Okay? So then we call it occasional. You could also call it irregular. The irregular could be within the line, even within the line, or it could be within the, I'm used the word paragraph because I want to just get it across to my students that we say verse paragraph for words which we generally use as stanza,
Right.
as verse. Why does the writer do it? Why does the poet do it? It could be for euphony. You know the word euphony, my dear students? That is the music. The opposite of euphony, some of you might know, is cacophony. When there's a lot of noise, besur avaz, then we call it cacophony. But what we are looking for in poetry naturally is euphony. And you find that. In mixed meter, you could have what is called catalexis. My dear students, these are very, very specific, specialized terms, but you need to understand. When you read a poem and you suddenly find that there is an I and there is no N, or there is an I and there's no T and there's just an apostrophe on the top. Why does the poet do it? Namita, the poet does it because he doesn't want to break the rhythm of the, and as you just mentioned, you and me, you and me is not you and me. So in the same way, sometimes because he doesn't want the rhythm to be broken, he could just get rid of. This would be like would not. Would be replaced by wouldn't. See, wouldn't, my dear students, becomes one syllable, whereas would not, cannot, right? And therefore, very often, the poet just gets rid of one syllable, just drops a syllable, omits a syllable.
As for example, the line that we read out, instead of writing in the grave, he's written in the grave.
In the grave, right? And when you read it that way, the flow, the rhythm
is maintained.
Hypermetry, interestingly, I'm not very happy saying this, Namita, is also called a feminine ending.
Oh.
And one critic points out, why do we call it feminine ending? Because it does not end at the end of the line, but continues on to the next line.
Oh.
Okay. And they say, because females don't stop talking. They go on and on. I don't like the reason why it's called feminine ending, but that's the explanation that a critic has given. It goes on to the next line. Hypermetry, you would notice, is when it does not stop at the end of the line, but it goes on into the next line. We could take an example. It's a beautiful example from Shakespeare. Namita, I'm sure you can read it out to our students.
To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune.
Notice, it doesn't. If you start marking iambic pentameter, you'll notice how it goes on to the next line. Another mixed meter that we have to understand is elision. It is the omission or the slurring over of a syllable. For example, let us take a simple word like flower. Sometimes you pronounce it as flower, right? Flower. But sometimes when you want to retain the rhythm, so what do you say? Flower.
Flower.
Right? So what are you doing? You are just sort of gliding over, very beautifully. It's like gliding, it's like paragliding maybe, where you just slur over, you just go over. That is elision. We are looking at pairs. Namita pointed out to you that you must take them together so that you understand. In the same way, diaresis is the absolute opposite of elision. If in elision you are slurring over, what you do in diaresis is just the opposite. Instead of one syllable, you have two syllables. For example,
why should we, in the compass of a pail, keep law and form and due proportion?
Okay, so you have the stress being maintained more, so that each syllable, so that you do not break the syllable count when you read the entire line.
To whom the winged hierarch replied, O Adam, one Almighty is, from whom all things proceed, and up to him return, if not depraved from good, created all such to perfection, one first matter all.
Look at a word like created. When you want to make it elision, you'll say created. Right. And then when you want to have it diaresis because you want to maintain the rhythm, then you will say created. Right? This is what the poet does very beautifully in order to ensure that the rhythm of the poem is maintained. Another occasional mixed meter is when you have a caesura. A caesura. It comes from the Latin word which means pause. Can we have a line, Namita, as an example?
I think the most famous of them all, a thing of beauty is a joy forever.
Keats's Endymion, my dear students. Where do you pause? This is the question. This is what caesura means. Where do you pause? For poetic effect, a thing of beauty is a joy forever. You can't read it like that. You have to pause. There's another beautiful line, Namita. I'm sure you can find it for us from Macbeth.
Oh yes. Lady Macbeth?
Yeah.
Is this a dagger that I see before me?
Where do you want to pause? Is this the dagger that I see before me? No, that's no poetry. Shakespeare would not have it like that. And I'm sure the Elizabethan stage would not have it like that.
Definitely.
So what do? You pause at the end of, after dagger. So Namita, how would the students have to read it for us?
Is this a dagger that I see before me?
Notice how the lilt comes, right? You pause after dagger. And this is what we call caesura. Again, let's look at the opposite of caesura, and we've got enjambment, where there is no pause and you quickly run over it.
A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness, but still will keep a bar quiet for us and a sleep full of sweet dreams, and health and quiet breathing.
Wonderful, my dear students. Can we have the slide again, please? Can we quickly, you could jot down or you could try and remember or retain it. Remember all the different kinds of mixed meter that we have. We've got occasional, irregular, for the sake of effect, catalexis, hypermetry, elision, diaresis, caesura, enjambment. And now all these are what adds to the mixed meter. Let us move on to rhyme. I've talked about rhythm, but when we are looking at poetry, when we are looking at good poetry, rhyme also contributes to the musical effect. Generally, my dear students, when we look at rhyme, when we hear the word rhyme, we imagine that rhyme comes at the ends of lines, at the ending. So if I end a line with sleep, the second line should end with deep or reap or heap or weep. That's what we imagine. But when we look at rhyme, there are different kinds of rhyme. And I want you to be able to understand and appreciate this. For example, we can have internal rhyme. Namita, can we have a line or two, please?
This is from the ancient marina. And now there came both mist and snow, and it grew wondrous cold, and ice, mast high, came floating by, as green as emerald.
Notice, my dear students, that the rhyme is within the line. It is within the line, okay? So if you've got now, you've got snow. In those days, snow was pronounced snow. If you've got ice, then you've got, right, immediately, I'm sorry, if you've got high, you've got by. Okay, so where is the rhyme? Not at the end. The rhyming is within the line.
Right.
This is what we call internal rhyme. We could have, could we have another line, please?
The next lines, in fact, are, and through the drifts, the snowy cliffs. So here, drifts and cliffs.
Absolutely.
Did send a small dismal sheen, nor shapes of men nor beasts we ken, the ice was all between.
So you've got men, ken, between. You know how the rhyming is not at the end of the line, but within the line. So this is also a kind of rhyme, and this we call internal rhyme. The next kind of rhyme that I want you to look at is feminine rhyme. In the feminine rhyme, could just read one or two.
The sun has long been set, the stars are out by twos and threes. The little birds are piping yet among the bushes and trees.
English is a very interesting language, Namita. Words don't sound the way they look. You know, if you take THOUGH and THROUGH, right? They sound, they look, and then take ROUGH. So you've got ROUGH.
Rough.
You've got rough, and then you've got true.
True.